Hello and welcome back to the 100 Jobs Project. I'm your host, Katie. And if you are new here, I'm interviewing 100 people, mostly women, about what they do for work, how they get onto their fields, and how their job fits into their everyday life. So our guest today is Karina, who is the Director of Global Strategic Workplace Insights at Great Place to Work. And she's also on Instagram at corporate.homemaker. If you want to look her up. Karina, I'm really excited to chat with you today. I mean, your account is all about highlighting how you're present for your kids while working in a corporate role. You're showing your postpartum journey, and you're also bringing awareness to some dynamics that really uniquely affect women and moms in the workplace. And you also have this really cool career. So I'm hopeful that we can chat about a lot of fun stuff today.
I'm so excited to be here, Katie. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And please, if I, didn't sum up your Instagram account correctly, please,
That was perfect. It was actually great to hear someone else explain it like that. I'm like, that does sound cool.
So I know that not everyone who listens to this podcast is necessarily a mom or is even like planning on that in their future. There's some people who might be thinking about that as a possible road. I know that we have a handful of gents who listen to this, but I do still think that it's really important for anyone in any life phase to hear some of those conversations, just so that if you do decide you want to be a parent, you're going into things with good expectations. And if you're a man, you can understand how things impact women a little bit differently than they might impact you, whether that's, coworkers, family members. It's helpful for everyone.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I know I just chatted a lot. Would love, do you want to give us just a little bit about who you are, where you're living, and then we can get into your whole history.
That sounds great. Yeah. So my name is Karina and I live in South Florida, kind of near West Palm Beach area, if you're familiar with that. I have lived here for going on 13 years now, but from Colorado originally, did a big roundabout of the entire United States before ending up here. And that pretty much is a good summary of how I do things. I feel like I jump around a lot. I like to try different things. But I have, let's see, I have four girls, four daughters. So my oldest is 11. I also have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old. Motherhood has changed everything for me. It's changed my entire life, obviously, but also changed the way that I think about things. It's changed the way that I work. And with each new child, I think I've had to learn how to adapt differently as well. And my main thing is that I've learned how to work smarter, not harder. And I know that that sounds really cliche, but I am fiercely protective of my time. And one of the reasons that I am so passionate about talking about women at work is because I am a workforce researcher. That's the role that I've had for almost the past 10 years. I've been studying the world of work and predicting the future of work. And as part of that, I got to specialize in the motherhood penalty. And so I became very familiar with the unique hardships that women tend to face as they're growing their career once they start to have children. And in many cases, I didn't actually have that experience. I've worked for amazing companies. I've had amazing managers. And so I don't feel like my career has had to plateau. But seeing how common it is for everyone else has made me very fiercely passionate about sharing this message. And then on Instagram, I really wanted to take some of the statistics, some of the workforce researcher information that I know from my corporate job and apply it with a little bit of positivity because I feel like in the working mom space, there tends to be a lot of negativity around how difficult it is and how hard it is and how you never see your children and someone else is raising your children. And, being a mom is hard. Whether you're a stay at home mom, being a stay at home mom is hard. Being a work from home mom is hard. Being a corporate mom is hard. And just kind of being a mom in general can be difficult. Being a person in general is difficult. And so I really wanted to focus on positivity and some of the lessons that I've learned, but also just reminding us that we can do it. We can do it all.
I so appreciated finding your account and seeing some of those positive things, reaffirming that, yes, this is hard. Because I would agree. Like, I feel like my whole life and identity shifted in so many ways 2.5 years ago with my first. And now I'm at this crossroads where I'm finishing my MBA. I've always had this kind of career side that I have loved, but I'm seeing in real time, either if it's myself or friends, how motherhood can really impact work. And so I appreciate you highlighting some of those things and bringing awareness and showing that, there's some good parts too, but yeah, work smarter, not harder. I'm totally going to shift and then we'll get back into things. Getting to know you just a little bit more. You're in South Florida. You're from the mountains originally, but a few other little get to know you pieces right here. We're coming up on spring break season in the States. Do you have any big plans to get away from your sunny seaside abode?
So we are not going anywhere for spring break. However, we have a family wedding in Colorado in May, which is again where I'm from. And I'm a mountain girl at heart. I am so excited to go out to Colorado for a week for this wedding. And we're actually going to turn that into a longer vacation and go to my sister-in-law's house in Montana, stay there for a couple of weeks. And then in July, we're going to take a couple of days, just my husband and I, to go up to the mountains of New Hampshire and take a really difficult hike that we're trying to train for. So definitely trying to get as much mountain time as we possibly can. But for us, it just kind of worked out that it's going to be mostly in the summer.
That sounds so fun. And there is no more beautiful time to visit the mountains, in my personal opinion, than the summer. I mean, skiing is lovely in the winter, the white, but like just being out there, breathing in the fresh air, seeing the wildflowers. I have to ask, where in Montana is your sister-in-law? I grew up in Bozeman.
Okay. They live outside of Missoula.
Okay, so they're a little further north. That's really fun. I have also a summer trip planned. One of my good friends from growing up is getting married, and we're all going to a Dixie Chicks concert in Missoula. I'm equally excited, but very excited for you too, and good luck on the hike, especially training from sea level up to a little bit of a higher elevation.
Take all the good luck. I'll need it.
I never realized like how much of a big deal that was until we moved out to the East Coast and we're now like at sea level. And anytime I go back, I'm like climbing the stairs, like, ooh,
Mhm.
feeling a little winded.
Yes.
Now, are you a morning person, night owl?
Definitely night owl,
Okay.
100%. I am having to be a morning person right now because my milk supply has been struggling. And the lactation consultant that I met with told me that your milk, your prolactin levels are actually highest between midnight and 5 o'clock in the morning. So I've been waking up between 5 and 5:30 to pump. I'm actually finding that that first morning pump, I'm getting like just about the same amount of milk that I'm getting the entire workday when I'm pumping. But it's been
Wow.
really helpful for me. But yeah, my daughter is sleeping through the night and I am still waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to pump it. The good news is that I'm actually starting to really love it. And I think that that alone time, first thing in the morning, has become something I'm actually looking forward to. So I'm hoping that I keep it going even after the pumping situation comes to an end. But if I were to have my way, I could stay up all night long.
It's a good tip to know for any moms, future moms, people listening. Morning is a good time, but I'm glad your little one is sleeping through the night because early morning wake ups, if you are not getting good sleep, is rough. It is really nice though to just have a little bit of time to yourself sometimes. And right now, I feel like I'm a night owl because that's when my time for myself is. But I have been a morning person at different times of my life, and it is so nice to be up and ready and have your brain like fully functioning while everyone else is still waking up and coming into themselves for the day. So I am really excited for you that you're learning to love this phase right now.
Thank you.
Now, two more questions. I'd love to know if you have a guilty pleasure in your life right now,
Mm.
whether it's a little treat, a show, just something you're doing for yourself.
Well, I love chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love chocolate, always have. And so one of my favorite chocolate finds lately has been there's a brand called Alter Eco,
Oh,
and I found them at Whole Foods. It's very dark chocolate, but they have one that has little granules of mint in it. And so it's like a
oh,
minty dark chocolate, and it is just absolutely delicious. And I can eat a few squares of it and be very satisfied, insulin resistance. And so I have to be careful about eating too much sugar. And this doesn't really have that much sugar compared to a typical milk chocolate bar. And so I'm able to eat enough to feel satisfied without it negatively impacting my health goals. So that has been my guilty pleasure. I would say I have it like at lunch, I have it at dinner. It is a multiple times a day situation for me, but
Mhm.
I very much enjoy it.
The dark, dark chocolate, just there's something about it. It melts in your mouth. It's like rich and delicious. So I will look for that next time I'm at Whole Foods.
Absolutely.
You're starting a guilty pleasure for me too. And then the last thing I love to hear is just what is in your work bag, or if you're primarily working from home, what's at your workspace? 3 to 4 things or more or less, whatever that you just like keeping with you.
So I always have a notepad with me and I take notes all of the time in all of the meetings. I find that if I'm not actively writing some notes down, I'm not fully processing the conversation.
Mhm.
And I typically don't go back and actually look at the notes, but there's something about the act of writing that helps me synthesize the information and understand what we're talking about better. So I always have a notebook with me. I always have a mechanical pencil because they're just better than pens. And the other thing that I always have with me is this is a little box that my oldest daughter made with duct tape and a cereal box. And it says, I
Cute.
love my family, XOXO. There's a picture of our family that she drew and like little hearts and things like that. And this just makes me really happy. And I like having little mementos around the room that remind me of like who I'm doing this all for because sometimes I just need a little light in my day.
It's hard to top that. Thank you. With that, yeah, again, it just, knowing what people keep with them at work, I feel like does give you a little peek into just real life from people. We're sold so many things on the internet of, oh, well, you need this and this and this and this. But sometimes it's as simple as having something that is meaningful to you and then a good notebook, a good pencil. Well, let's chat a little bit more about how you got into your role, how your life has been impacted by motherhood. Did you always think that this is what you wanted to do when you grew up? Or did you have different goals and dreams as a little kid?
So I wanted to be an actress when I was a little kid. And I used to write stories. I would sit at a computer. I actually taught myself how to touch type at a very young age by typing out stories. I wrote a lot of stories, I wrote a lot of poetry, and I did a lot of acting. And those were my passions. They made me happy. I read a lot of books. And over the years, I sort of lost that part of myself. And I knew that it was never a question as to whether or not I was going to go to college. My parents very much had it as like, it's not if you go to college, it's where you're going to go to college.
Right.
And they knew that I wanted to be an actress and they were very supportive of that. But their thought process was great, you can study acting, but you're still going to get your degree. And I'm very grateful that they did that because in the process of getting my degree in theater, I learned that I was not nearly as pretty, as talented, or as connected in the industry as all of the other girls that I was in classes with. I had moved to California at this time. And it was a bit of an eye opening, very humbling place to be of looking around and realizing that like if I'm not even able to get callbacks for these auditions for these local performances or for these school performances, I probably don't have a very good shot at becoming this amazing, celebrity superstar actress. So I kind of had to take a step back and think, okay, if I don't want to be a professional waitress for the rest of my life, which I loved waitressing, very good at it, loved it, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do for a career. I needed to find something else. And so what I realized during that exploration was that I was a really good writer. And so I ended up switching gears and moving to Maryland, Virginia area where my parents had actually moved the time I was in California. And I started going to school for communications, public relations, and journalism. And that was just a phenomenal experience and really enjoyed my classes. When I graduated, I moved into the field of public relations. And I was working for a travel company as kind of like my first big out of college job. And it was a great opportunity. And in that time, I was doing a lot of press releases. We were working with journalists and travel bloggers who were kind of like, big celebrities and in the travel world. And we would help them come on media trips and help them write about it and just trying to get a lot of publicity for the travel brands that we worked for. I got to have some really fun opportunities there. I got to go to Eastern Europe as one of those media familiarization trips. But really, in the course of my work for this company, I started taking on more and more executive ghostwriting because the presidents of the brand were reading my press releases and they were liking it. And so they would ask me to write their president's letters. And then they would ask me to write their responses to media interviews and so on and so forth. So without even intending to, I ended up getting a lot of experience with executive ghostwriting. During this time, I also had my daughter, my oldest daughter. And to be honest with you, it was a challenging time because I was making, I think, $17 an hour. And my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time, he was my boyfriend, he was working at a pizzeria. So we couldn't afford daycare.
Yeah.
And he was working nights and weekends. I was working a traditional 9 to 5. And we had this hodgepodge care situation lined up where his boss's wife would watch our daughter on Mondays when he worked a double shift. And then on Thursdays, my boss let my daughter come to the office and she worked at the office with us. And then on Fridays, I worked from home with her without a babysitter. So I was incredibly grateful for the flexibility that I had in this job. There was a lot to be grateful for. It was a great opportunity at the time, but it was also a very toxic work environment, and there wasn't much of a future for me. But I felt like I wasn't sure that I could leave because I wasn't sure that there would be the opportunity to have that same flexibility elsewhere.
Yeah.
I reached a point where I was growing increasingly frustrated with the toxic workplace. It was from the top down. The CEO would send, frankly, abusive emails to my boss and to other staff members. And it was this immediate all hands on deck fire drill. Even if it was 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday evening, I'd be getting frantic phone calls and I was growing increasingly tired of it. And so I started just looking for fun on probably Indeed for different opportunities. Again, not thinking that I would have an easy time finding something. And there happened to be a company called Ultimate Software that was looking for an executive ghostwriter. And it was in the tech industry, which, coming from the travel industry, that is one of the lower paying industries. Tech, especially at the time and also still today, is one of the highest paid industries. And it's very competitive. It's very difficult to get into tech. And I had unique experience. And so I might as well give it a shot. And so I sent in my resume, I wrote a cover letter, and it just so happened that this company, of course, they originally wanted someone with tech experience, but what they really wanted was executive ghostwriting experience. And so they had a really hard time finding someone that matched that. And they had apparently been looking for months.
Wow.
So when my resume came in, I got a call from the recruiter within 24 hours that I was on the call with who became my future boss. And it just all happened very quickly. And I am so grateful for all of that. Tech has completely changed my life. I can talk more about how my experience with this particular company actually did change my life through their fertility benefits, through their retirement matching, like all of these things. It completely turned our life around to where we are in a very different situation today than we were 11 years ago when my daughter was born. But I think that I like to share that story because I think whether you're trying to break into the tech industry or you're trying to break into consulting or you're trying to break into higher education or whatever the case may be, there are often workarounds. It can be difficult to shift, but don't short sell yourself. And your experience is unique and beneficial. And the chances are that there is probably someone out there who is looking for your experience that can help get you in the door of where you want to go.
On a personal note, like, I actually really appreciate that story for a few reasons. First, cool to see that what you were interested in as a kid, writing lots of stories, doing all of these other things. Sure, you had other interests, acting, but you ended up in a space where you kind of came back to some of those interests. I always think that's really fun to see that come to life with people. But ironically, my first job was in tech, and then I moved to the travel industry. And the travel industry is so fun. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really cool, glamorous things that you get to do and see and be a part of. But like you said, it is known for being on the lower paying side of things. So you kind of trade pay for some of the glamour, and it can be tough to like commit to making a switch and making a shift. And I am in this phase now where I am shifting a bit. And so it's great to hear that there's hope on the other side. I know that's a little bit traumatic. It's just a good reminder that there are people out there who need the exact sort of experience that you have. And there's just a whole big wide sea. If leadership isn't great, if you're in any sort of bad situation, there is greener grass.
One of my favorite parts about my story is actually that my boss, the one that hired me for the executive ghostwriter, in my first year of working for her, she sat me down and she asked me in a goals conversation, what did you love to do as a child? And what did you want to be when you grew up?
Interesting.
These were questions no one had ever asked me as a manager. And I told her I had wanted to be an actress. I loved to be on stage. I loved to tell stories. I loved to write. And she said to me in that meeting, I think you would actually be a really great fit for the thought leadership team who is going and presenting on stages and writing these articles for different publications and
Yeah.
meeting with executives and doing these thought leadership presentations. She helped me get these growth opportunities to prove that I could do that job. And in 2020, when our company was purchased by private equity and the executives that I was writing for left the company, I was asked to join this team that I had desperately wanted to join, but felt like such an imposter because I didn't know anything about tech or HR tech. And why would these executives listen to me? And it was my dream job. And I got to do it for a number of years until my family kept growing and the travel became too much. I really did get to live out my childhood dreams in a different way. And even to this day, I've switched my role because I needed something that didn't have as much travel. But just this week, I've had 3 different speaking opportunities come up. And so I do feel incredibly fortunate that I do get to live out my childhood dreams in a very different way than I
Yeah.
anticipated. Like I thought I would be on TV shows or movies being a character, not talking about AI and the future of work, but I still absolutely love it.
I appreciate that you mentioned that it took a few years of finding the right opportunities to really position you for that growth because sometimes I find myself being impatient and just wanting to snap my fingers and have it be there. But sometimes you really do have to play the long game and look for something here, keep everything going business as usual a few months later, and you just keep jumping up and over. I would love to hear how making a pivot from travel to tech changed the trajectory of your life and what you do now.
First thing was the salary. And
Yeah.
so I went from making $17 an hour to when I first joined, there was that difficult conversation where the recruiter asks you, how much money do you want to make?
Mhm.
And I remember asking, what are the options, right? What are you working with? And they came back and they said, no, we'd really love for you to tell us what you'd like. And I remember agonizing over this
Mhm.
decision. And finally I told my husband that I was gonna ask for $70,000. And that was really scary because that seemed like a lot of money, but I knew that tech paid well, and I knew that they were really interested in me, and this could be like a life-changing amount of money. And I remember sharing that with a couple of people in my personal life, and one of them was actually like, "That's ridiculous, Karina. They're never gonna pay you that.
Mm.
That's too much. You shouldn't ask for that much. It's too much." And so I was really apprehensive, but that's what I asked for. And when the offer letter came back, they offered me 80,
Amazing.
which was just, again, such that was I was in tears. That's
Yeah.
unheard of. Who gives you more more than you asked
Yeah.
for when joining a new company? But that was the type of company that Ultimate Software was. And their benefits were incredible. They had 100% paid for healthcare. So they covered all of the premiums, not only for the employees, but also for their families. And they had, I think at the time, a 40% employer match on 401k contributions
Wow.
that they then increased to 45% a couple of years later. Again, we had no money. We weren't quite having to choose between groceries and diapers, but we were having to be very careful about what types of groceries we bought and what type of diapers we bought. And so to suddenly have healthcare covered and to have this higher salary that enabled me to start actually putting money aside for retirement for really the first time ever. Like I had put a very small portion of my income at the previous job towards retirement, but 3% of nothing is still nothing.
Right.
And my husband actually at the same year that I got my job, he made a big leap and transitioned into the industry that he's now in. And so it's been a really incredible experience where we've both grown together and taken risks together that have ultimately paid off. They just financially, I would say, was the biggest change, but it was also having an incredible culture for the first time, coming from that toxic environment and then
Yeah.
suddenly being around people that actually really liked each other and were really kind to each other, but were also incredibly smart and incredibly strategic. And so I learned so much about marketing. I learned so much about writing and the technology industry and what was happening in the world of work. And there was just so many growth opportunities and things that I realized like, hey, this is actually a lot of fun and I'm really good at it. And sometimes I would almost feel like I was above myself in a meeting after I just said something really smart and been like, wow, I like this feels really good. It feels good to use my brain this way. And as someone who had always wanted to be a mother and who absolutely loved being a mother, but it's a very thankless job being a mother. I had thought for most of my youth that I would probably want to be a stay-at-home mom. And sometimes to this day I still go through that when things get really difficult. Like I fantasize about being a trad wife and just baking sourdough all day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it was eye opening that there is a lot, like I found a lot of value in being the type of person that was bringing value to meetings. And I liked the challenge. I liked looking at a problem and figuring out a solution and taking the data to understand what is the most strategic thing we can do from here and learning how to manage people. It was thinking of myself in a new way and watching myself start a new chapter that was really exciting. And then, probably the most tangible, obvious way that this company changed my life was that they offered fertility benefits. And my husband and I, we had had our oldest, who was actually a huge surprise because my doctors had told me I would probably never get pregnant due to a
Wow.
hormonal disorder that I have. And then, when she came around, like 6 months after I started my new job, we got married and we were actively trying to grow our family and to have another one, and it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
For several years, we struggled from secondary infertility. And when we were ready to start moving, my company offered fertility benefits and they ended up paying for IVF for us, which was like a $35,000 cost at the time. We had to cover a little bit of it just for the testing of the embryos to make sure that the embryos were viable, the ones that we wanted to use. But we never would have been able to afford that on our own at the time. Our first round was successful, and our 5-year-old baby she came as a direct result of my company investing in me and my family in a way that had absolutely no positive impact on them. They also offered paid maternity leave, which I had never had before. I took 2 weeks of maternity leave with my first because it was unpaid and we couldn't afford for me to take any more.
Yeah.
The maternity leave experience has been a very different experience as well.
Yeah. I wouldn't wish 2 weeks of leave after such a big life and physical transition as well on anyone. So I'm sorry that you went through that, but I'm also so glad that you've now been able to have both experiences. It sounds like a lot of the work that you're doing is hopefully enabling a future where that is a more accessible experience for a lot of women.
I hope so. It does seem like in the past 11 years, there have been leaps and bounds of progress when it comes to maternity leave and what's expected. We still have a ways to go. I still think it's not enough,
Yeah.
but we've come a very long way from what I can tell.
What an amazing benefit for your employer to offer too. I think that sometimes the benefits, like if someone is transitioning to a new job, are overlooked. It's, oh, yeah, healthcare, check the box. But if you are in any sort of situation where you need specific health benefits or might in the next few years, I know you don't necessarily want to go into a conversation usually with a recruiter and say, well, will you cover my IVF if you need
Mhm.
it? But if there's any more details that you can dig and get about benefits before accepting an offer. I think that's helpful advice.
Absolutely.
Now, how did you get from what we've been chatting about now with Ultimate Software to your current role?
As I mentioned, Ultimate Software was purchased by a private equity company in 2020. 2020. And we were then merged with a competitor of ours that was also owned by the private equity company. And so we became UKG, which is a major workforce management technology company. It was really fun to be on the front lines of that change and that exciting development of creating a new company and a new brand. And it was also difficult, right? There were some growing pains too. Culturally, their company was a little bit different than our company, and so we had to do the work of figuring out what is our culture as a new company. But for me, it was actually a really challenging but really exciting time because I was pregnant. Like I had gotten my IVF miracle, so I was pregnant with my baby, and when the executives left, I had the opportunity to step into truly my dream job on this dream team doing this job that I had been dreaming of since my boss had mentioned it several years prior. Again, it was 2020, so everything was virtual for a while, which was perfect because again, I had a baby.
Yeah.
And after, I think probably towards the end of 2021, maybe early 2022, we started doing a lot more traveling and
Okay.
going to conferences and meeting with executives and things like that. So when I joined the team, I was promoted into a manager level position, but they didn't have headcount available yet. So I had the manager title, which was a really big deal as anyone trying to get into that, they call it the broken rung. It is traditionally very difficult for women to get that first manager level role, and so it was a really big deal that I negotiated hard for it, to be honest, too. Like,
Yeah.
originally, they had offered me my dream job. They knew it was my dream job, and it was very difficult at the time for me to say, "Tell me more.
Yeah.
What title is this job and this team that is a brand" because it's a long story, but, like, the person that had run that team was moving over to product, so a new leader
Okay.
was stepping in to run this team. So there was a lot of unknowns. We didn't know what the team was gonna be called. We didn't know what my title was gonna be in all of this, and I really am proud of myself for taking the risk of potentially losing this dream job by being a little bit of a squeaky wheel and essentially saying, like, "I'm not interested in a lateral move. I'm very interested. I'm very excited about this opportunity, but I've been growing towards a manager role. I've been positioned in my current team. Like I know that my boss wants to put me into a manager role and that's what we've been growing towards. So I'm not interested in starting over
Yeah.
laterally and starting back from the bottom again. So I was able to become a technical manager. It did take a couple of years before I actually had a team under me. I was promoted to senior manager at some point. One thing that I think that I've done really well in my career is that in every job that I've had, I have been able to take the lessons that I learned from my boss asking me those questions all those
Yeah.
years back and realizing that jobs are not set in stone.
Yeah.
And I think that most of us tend to think when we have a role that like this is our job description or this is the job that I was hired for, how it currently stands. In my experience, we actually have a lot of control over molding our roles to what we want them to be as long as we know how to frame it as a win-win for the business. I'm proud of how I was able to look around and figure out like, okay, I don't want to be traveling like many of my colleagues are every single week. So what value can I provide in this role? What needs are there? What gaps are there that I can step into to provide that I can do working from home? So I'm still going and speaking twice a month, but those other 2 weeks every month, I'm still home, but I'm still providing that value. And so, was able to do that, was voted again. And then right around, I guess it was 2024, I started seeing that things were shifting a lot within the organization. Again, it's private equity, things change. And I just
Yep.
knew that we were going to be expected to travel a lot more and that there was going to be a lot of things that were going to be kind of outside of my control. And so at that point, I started looking around and seeing what shifts could I make here? And it was actually very serendipitous that my current boss reached out to me from the child company, Great Place to Work, that I had been partnering with on a couple of projects. She reached out to me and she said, "Hey, we're hiring this director level position. We really need someone great. Based on how familiar you are with us and the work that we were doing, I was hoping that you might have someone in mind." And I kind of took that as an invitation, like, I might be interested in this, and within 3 days, I had the job.
Oh,
That's kind of been it's been a up and down and sideways journey, but I really have learned along the way that I think as long as you're doing good work and forming good relationships and always thinking about how can I make the biggest impact on the business possible, that that we actually have a lot of opportunities.
Definitely. It sounds like you also found a company that had a really good culture. And despite the company itself shifting and what it looked like over the years, you were able to say, you know what, this is a great place that I would like to continue to be and position yourself strategically to provide value in a way that helped you keep that good culture and still grow in your career. So it's sometimes unique to see people stay in I don't want to say one place because your company has shifted and grown and changed and you've changed roles obviously, but within one organization for so long. So I think it's really admirable that you've been able to do that in a way that has really worked for you. I would love to hear what a typical work day looks like from you. You know, you're waking up at 5, you're pumping. What does your day look like from there until you're off the clock and beyond that, I guess?
I'm typically waking up at 5 or 5:30. I'm pumping. Sometimes I'll be reading a book. Sometimes I've actually been watching YouTube, like homemaker channels, because I really do like love to fantasize about that life, even though it's
Yeah.
so different from mine. But I'm doing something. Sometimes I'm journaling, and on a great day, I'll be doing a little bit of yoga, like a few sun salutations, definitely drinking one, if not two cups of coffee. My girls wake up around 6:30, and so at that point, it's a transition time of helping them get ready for the day. We'll get up around that time as well, and we kind of tag team, and he typically helps a lot more with the 5-year-old and the 2-year-old. I help a lot more with the baby. I make breakfast for everyone. It's kind of like a morning rush. There's a lot going on, a lot of
Yeah.
things that need to get done in that time, and then we're out the door by 7:30, and, my girls' school is 2 miles down the road. I'll pack all 4 of them in. We drive to school, we park in the parking lot and walk about 15 minutes to the school because I don't wanna deal with a car line. So, we'll walk in, and that's, like, a really fun time just to get morning sunlight in our eyes, and, of course, I've got the baby in the stroller and the 2-year-old either on my hip or holding my hand, and so I'll drop the 2 older girls off at school, walk back, then I take the 2 younger girls to daycare, and I'm grateful that my boss and my direct team, we're all on the East Coast, but a lot of our company is on the West Coast. And so I find that I'm able to have more strategic focus blocks in the morning, and I don't have like a super hard opening at 8:30 or 9. So I'm able to kind of take my time a little bit if my toddler is really wanting to be incredibly slow walking into school, I don't have to rush her. So typically I'll nurse the baby one last time in the car before heading into daycare, drop them both off at daycare, and then come home. And at that point, I might spend 5 minutes in the vegetable garden doing a little bit of weeding or watering the plants. I might have another cup of coffee and just sit on the lanai and go through my to-do list and figure out what my most important things are for the day. But I try to have some type of kind of grounding just a little bit of time that's just for me that is a transition point between the morning time with the girls and my career time. I do try to have focus blocks in the morning, and so I use Kelly Nolan's The Bright Method for time management, and, that was a course that I went through. This is actually my last week. So I typically have my calendar very clearly laid out, and I know exactly what is on tap for that day. I'll have, like, blocks in my calendar so that I have at least a couple of hours in the morning to do those really intense needs because I have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
So if I don't block time in my calendar to do the focus work, inevitably every minute of the day will get taken up with meetings. So I try to do some focus blocks in the morning. I'll, make myself a really quick lunch on a good day. Sometimes it's a protein shake. I try to work out at lunchtime. Has only happened 3 times since I came back to work, but that's the goal. And then typically my afternoons are just back-to-back meetings. I try to have a hard stop on my calendar at 4:30 to do half an hour of processing the day and just making sure that any to-do items that came up in those meetings get transferred to my to-do list, get transferred into my calendar so that I can make sure that I address them, process email, etc. But oftentimes I'll get meetings booked over that time, but I try my
Sure.
best. And then I typically start cooking around 5 if possible or 5:30. I have a meeting until then. 5:30 to 6 is when my husband will come home with the kids and we'll have a family dinner. After that, it's either go for a family walk or do bath time or play a game or just talk sometimes. And then it seems to be like a very fairly rapid procession of bedtimes. So my 5-year-old has reading virtual tutoring lessons 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday at 7:30. So that's kind of like the anchor point where she'll go and she'll do her tutoring lessons. I or my husband will put the baby and the 2-year-old to bed. Then oftentimes we read with the 5-year-old and the 11-year-old. And right now we're listening to Harry Potter. So
Fun.
normally I'm reading a chapter book to them, but right now we've been really enjoying the new Harry Potter audiobooks where they have a full cast and then they go to bed. At that point, lately I've been so exhausted that typically the girls are in bed between 8:30 and 9 and I've been like crashing out with either, unfortunately on Instagram or a good book
Yeah.
and falling asleep by 10. So it's fairly like rapid fire, but
It truly sounds like a packed day, but also a rewarding day. Now, I could sit here and ask you questions all day, but I know that our time is coming to an end. I would love to know, just as you think holistically about your life and your future, what does success look like for you?
success to me looks like having goals that I'm working towards and making progress towards, but more importantly, enjoying where my feet are. One of my big driving goals has always been I'd like to retire early, and we're investing again, big change from 11 years ago, but
Yeah.
now we're on the path to early retirement. And so I'd love to someday retire and, have the option to not be working a corporate job and to do the sourdough baking and hanging out with the kids and all of that. But in the meantime, I want to have my cake and eat it too. So while I'm working towards that, I also want to make sure that I'm baking in a lot of time to have somewhat slower mornings with my daughters where we're not rush, 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 and have evenings where we're together around a dinner table and enjoying each other's company and not rushing to a million sports, not doing all of these things, like having intentional family time and actually enjoying where our feet are. And like someday I'd love to have a lot of land with a farm and chickens and all of that. Right now I have a 0.2 acre HOA lot, but I
Hmm.
have a vegetable garden and fruit trees that I've planted there. So like success looks like I know where I want to go, but in the meantime, I'm making the most out of what I have.
I think that is a beautiful sentiment to, yeah, truly just be where your feet are. And that's something that I will certainly take from our conversation today. So thank you so much for joining me. And I will be sure to link your Instagram on the show notes if anyone wants to find you. You can always find us too at 100jobsproject.com or on Instagram at 100jobsproject. If you want to support the show, take a screenshot, share it on your Instagram story, leave a review. And that is that. Karina, I wish you success wherever life takes you. And thank you again for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. This was a wonderful conversation.